Hey, welcome to Father's House Online. It's great to be with you again, and want to talk a little bit about the uncertainty of going into a future, especially a future that God is calling you into. You're not so sure of what it's going to look like, and even if you want to step into it anyway. And I've been talking to quite a number of people recently, other leaders within churches across the city and across Elim, and even people within our own church. And there is a great degree of uncertainty, but there's a number of people really strongly believe that God is on the verge of doing something amazing and wants to take us in a new direction, and has been using this period of lockdown to speak to his people and to draw them closer to him in preparation for what lies ahead. And it's great that God wants to speak to ordinary people like me and you. You know, I sometimes think, why would God want to speak to me? But he does. He wants us to be close to him in relationship with him. And he wants us to be part of his plan for redeeming humanity and building his kingdom. And we're going to look a little bit about that today. And some of the people I've spoken to, and I feel this way myself, there can be a bit of trepidation and fear when you think God is asking you to do something that might be out of your comfort zone. So we're going to look at a story in the Bible where this happens to a particular person. And we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 4, a few verses. But before that, in chapter 3, it's the well-known passage of Moses in the burning bush. And Moses is out in the wilderness, in the desert, and he sees this bush on fire that isn't burning up. And he's curious, naturally, so he goes over to the bush to find out what's going on. And a voice speaks to him from within the bush. It's the voice of God himself who's within the bush. And basically, God, in talking to Moses, calls him into ministry. He's setting out a call and a plan before Moses. Now, his mission that God's calling him into, should he choose to accept it, cue Mission Impossible music, was to go to Pharaoh, the Pharaoh of Egypt, the supreme ruler of not just of Egypt, but all of the empire of Egypt, and to ask him on God's behalf to let all of his workforce go, the workforce that's building the pyramids and his city and everything else, who would be struggling with that, to let them all go, to go into the desert, the wilderness, to worship their God. Now, in the course of this conversation, God tells Moses everything that's going to happen. He doesn't just call him and say, well, wait and see. He literally, from start to finish, says, this is how it's going to work out. This is going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. Even down to the last bit of when they leave, that the Egyptians will like throw money and good stuff at them. You know, just bless them with loads of stuff that they're going to need. Just in another way of reassuring Moses that, hey, Moses, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. And it's funny because in the conversation, Moses' reply begins with, and who are you? You know, who shall I say is talking to me and sent them when I go back and tell my people and tell Pharaoh? And God answers that, you know. And after that, Moses then comes up with a number of other excuses as to why he isn't the person and he can't do it. He can't do what God's asked him to do. But God, being God, is not flustered because he is supreme over all things and knows everything that's going to happen. He just calmly answers all of Moses' questions and deals with his doubts. And that's what we get to the end of the chapter. And it seems like here, after God having, you know, reassured Moses that Moses is now good to go, he's going to say, yeah, I'm in. And then we start chapter 4 and we realize, Moses isn't quite ready yet. So let's have a look at that now. So Exodus 4 verses 1 to 5, just let me read them to you now. It says, Moses answered back to God and says, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? So he's obviously got some doubts that anybody's going to believe him. It says, then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? "A staff," Moses replied. And the Lord said to him, "Throw it on the ground." And Moses threw the staff on the ground and it became a snake and he ran from it. Well, you would, wouldn't you? You know, if a big snake appears in front of you out of the blue, you're going to run away. It says, then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." Just hold on there a moment. A large snake on the floor. God saying, "Hey, it's okay. Just grab it by the tail. You'll be fine." I think I might have a few doubts. But it says, so Moses reached out and took hold of the snake and turned it back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." So once again, God is reassuring him and even using like a miracle. He goes on to use more to say, "Look, Moses, I am who I say I am. I'm God. You'll be fine." You know, but we can see that Moses clearly still has doubts and a problem. You know, what is his problem? God's already told him everything that everything's going to be fine. And yet Moses responds with two words that would sound very familiar to many followers of Jesus and throughout all of history and even into the church in the present day. And I can relate to these words. I can really relate to them. I don't know about you, but I can. Because Moses replies with, "What if? What if?" You know, so God's performed a miracle. He's told him it's going to be fine again and again and again. And Moses is still saying, "Yeah, but what if?" How many of us, you know, when we sense that God's calling us into something, you know, we reply with, "Yeah, but what if? What if it goes wrong? What if I'm not hearing from God? What if, what if, what if, what if?" There can be numerous what ifs that are personal to us, but they're also real to us. And Moses's what if is genuine. You know, now we can look back and think, what an idiot. And it's very easy to criticize Moses or indeed criticize other people for their supposed lack of faith when they look at all that God has done. But I believe that Moses had good reasons for being doubtful and being unsure. And that those reasons are worth exploring. That's what we're going to look at today. And I believe it's important because I think many of us can and will relate to those reasons because we struggle with those same doubts and fears too. Now, there are a number of reasons. And the first one is for physical reasons. Moses had a problem with speaking. Some scholars actually believe that he may have had a stutter and therefore was quite embarrassed and struggled with speaking. But how many of us are shy and easily embarrassed when we have to stand out or stand up before a crowd of people, small or large, and speak out in public? Then what if you have another condition? You may have a disability or an illness that makes it difficult for you to be that upfront person. You could be suffering from acute pain or an illness. There could be all sorts of reasons. And it's very easy to judge people when they don't seem to have enough faith to step up and be at the front. But the reality is we often don't fully understand their personality, their reasons, or what they're going through. You may not believe it, but I'm actually quite a shy person and struggle to speak in front of people. You may find that hard to believe, but it's something I've worked on for years, but still don't find easy. So I get it when other people don't find it easy too. Moses had a physical reason why he didn't want to do it and didn't think that he could do it. Another reason is this is emotional. We can have emotional reasons for not wanting to step out into the calling that God is calling us to. See, some years earlier, Moses, he took a step of courage. He's out walking and he sees something going on that's not good and a person being mistreated and abused. and he'd sort of walking away and just turn his back on it, thinking, not my problem. Moses says, actually, it is my problem. This is a fellow human being, and I need to do something about it. Most of us wouldn't. So he steps out, takes a step of courage, and tries to do something to help a fellow Israelite who was suffering. And what happens? Well, apart from it going wrong, which I'll come to in a moment, the person he's trying to help ends up telling him to get lost, basically, and says, who the hell do you think you are? So they reject him. The very person he's trying to help rejects him. Have you ever been rejected? Especially when you've been just trying to do the right thing? Rejection can be a really hard thing to overcome. Now Moses, when he tried earlier to help even one of his people, ends up being rejected. So when God's saying, I want you to go back and help, 2 million of them, he stands a lot more chance of being rejected, especially with the crazy idea that he's going back with. So I can understand Moses having some doubt there. Another genuine reason is fear. Now, we all know we shouldn't have fear. It says we shouldn't fear. We should be able to trust in God. The scripture says you've not been given a spirit of fear. And we get that. But come on, let's be real. Many of us do struggle with fear, and that's okay. I want to tell you, it's okay to be fearful. It's not okay to let your fears overrule you and cripple you, but it's okay to have fear. Now, although Moses was stepping up to confront a bully in this story, and you can read about that in the earlier chapters of Exodus, a bully who was abusing a fellow Israelite, it all went horribly wrong. And Moses ends up killing this guy. He doesn't just stop him from beating the innocent person. He goes too far and he kills the guy. He kills the Egyptian who was abusing his fellow Hebrew. Therefore, because of that, in Egypt, Moses was a wanted man. He would be. He'd murdered somebody. He'd committed a crime that was punishable by death. If he went back in Moses' head, and I would feel the same way, if I go back, I'm going to be arrested and I'm going to suffer. I'll be put in prison and maybe even worse. In spite of the fact that God had told him that it was going to be okay, Moses still had doubts, and read verse 19 in chapter 4, because God clearly tells him, it says, no, all the people who were after you have died, so you don't have to worry. But how many of us still have that nagging doubt? That's easy for you to say. You're not the one going back. You're not the one that will suffer. So Moses had another genuine reason, which was fear. And then there's one more reason. Well, there might be one more after it. And this is mental. It's when I talk about being mental, in a way it involves mental health. Things from our past that shape us and form our opinions and our fears and everything else. And I believe that with this one, that even if Moses did trust what God was saying to him about the coast being clear and it's okay to go back, he still would have had to overcome two major stumbling blocks in his own mind before he could go back. And the first one was this: to accept God's forgiveness for the sin he had committed of murdering someone. See, when you mess up, and especially if you mess up badly, you and hurt somebody, that person can forgive you, but we struggle to forgive ourselves and totally accept God's forgiveness. We know it's real. We sort of believe it, if you will. It's there in the Bible. We go, oh yeah, that's true. But the reality of accepting that is different. And I have met so many people, and I've struggled with this myself. And if you don't struggle, great. I'm really glad you don't struggle. But I've met so many people over the years who do struggle when they've messed up badly to accept and live in the forgiveness of God when God actually says, no, it's covered. It's okay. So that was one stumbling block he would have to overcome in his mind. The second one is this: believing that even if he was forgiven, that he was not disqualified to be used by God to lead his people out of bondage and into freedom. And he would have felt that way, because how many of us, if we mess up, think, well, that's it, I've blown it. Yes, God's forgiven me, but I've blown it. I can't go back. I can't do that. I've disqualified myself because of my own stupidity, my own sin, my own mistakes, whatever, and we forget that our God is the God of restoration. And it's hard to let go of that, especially if our mistake or sin or whatever has hurt and damaged other people, and if it's people you love. It's really hard to let go of that, because you can live with the regret. But God is in the business of giving people a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance. I could go on. And that's amazing. But we need to realize that all these reasons, doubts and fears, are genuine. And it's not just Moses. We can all have them. Now, when you reflect on those reasons, I can relate to Moses. Don't know about you, but I certainly can relate to him. And I'm glad that he had fears and doubts, because I have them often too. And that, in a strange way, it encourages me. But also, we need to remember the truth. We can have those fears and doubts, but God is still God. Moses did end up doing what God asked him to do, because God is God. And Moses realized that it wasn't about him or his past or his abilities anyway. It was about God and what God could do. So we have to remember, and we give thanks for this God that we desperately need. We can't do ministry or even life without him. And that's a great place to get to realize, I'm broken here. I'm lost. I can't do this. Unless God shows up, I can't do this. Moses was very aware that he couldn't do it without God. He needed to be convinced that God was in it. So let's thank God that because of his love for us, his amazing fatherly love for us, that he sent his only son, Jesus, to die in our place for the sins that we'd committed, past, present and future, so that we could be forgiven from all of our sins and set free to follow him with a clean slate. And let us also thank God that he's given us his Holy Spirit, so that we can do the things that God is asking us to do and calling us to do, even if they frighten the life out of us, even if they look impossible to us and actually are impossible in the natural realm, such as some miracles. That it's not about us, it's about God, his gifting, his calling that he pours into us. Now, I said earlier that there might be another reason. And yes, you can say I'm reading into this a bit, but having had experience with people and myself, I think it could be a genuine reason why Moses maybe didn't want to do what God was asking him to do. And this reason is simply this: because there was nothing in it for him. Now, think about that. This may seem unbelievable to you, to us, but how many of us, even if it's only once or twice, or maybe even more, will only step up to serve God or do something for God in his church if it fits in with our plans and our diaries? If it doesn't benefit us, then we won't do it. God was calling Moses into something that was much bigger than him and his own little world. Moses had run away to get away from trouble, and he had a comfortable life and he was doing okay. Now God's calling him out of that comfort zone, and the protection that he had around him, into something where the future's unknown and it's going to be difficult and he could suffer, And would you really want to give up all your comfort and everything you lived for almost 40 years to move into a realm of uncertainty and stress and anxiety and all sorts of problems, as you can see as you read the rest of Exodus? Maybe you'd have second thoughts too. But God was calling Moses out of his comfort zone to join him, God, in loving his people enough to stand with them through times of trial and suffering until they had been brought out of bondage into the freedom that God had planned for them. Now, what's that got to do with us? Well, God has called us. God has called you and God has called me to be part of something that is much bigger than us, just as he did with Moses. It's much bigger than us. It's much bigger than our plans or our desires. It's more important than our own comfort and doing what we like to do week in, week out. And what's this thing that's much bigger than us that God's called us into? It is called the church, the body of Christ. And Christ is the head of the church, and if you read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 to 27, and we'll look at that as part of our Zoom meeting on the Sunday morning and discuss that, where it talks about we're all part of one body. Jesus Christ is the head of the church, but we are the body. And we might all be different parts, but we're still part of the body. It says the hand cannot say to the foot, I don't want anything to do with you. And yet we do that in church, don't we? It's like, I don't want to do that. And no, it doesn't matter if I'm part of it anymore. I'll pull away. I'll start Foot Ministries International, because I don't need the rest of the body. I'm okay. No, it's not okay. We are part of a body. We're part of something much bigger than us. Church is not about you or about me and what we like. If you don't like church, not that that's not important, but in a way it isn't important. Church is about Jesus. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about Jesus and what he wants. It's about him and his kingdom and his glory, about what he's called us into. John 14:15 says this. Jesus talking to his disciples, therefore talking to us, says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. And you read that from 15 through to 17. Jesus is imploring. It's the prayer he makes before he goes to the cross, so it's important. His people to be one in unity, to be together, to not drift apart and what have you. So we need to be close and remain as a body. We can't be running off doing what we want to do. Yes, there are lots of different ministries within the church, but we still got to be part of the church and committed to it. Something much bigger than us, which is what God was calling Moses to as well. Now I want to just raise another important point before we draw to a close. And I'm struggling to talk about this because it might come across as negative, but I think it needs to be said anyway. When I sort of received the call into ministry, over many years, I had people come to me and say, Des, you should be considering going into the ministry. And it happened a number of times, and I had my answer ready. It's like, no chance. No chance. I'm not going into the ministry. And I used to say a bit of a joke, but I meant it really. When God writes it in 50-foot letters in the sky in the clouds saying, Des Dehan, I'm calling you into ministry, then I'll respond, and it was my get out clause, because I was under no illusion that going into the ministry as a pastor was an easy thing. I'd seen people I know in leadership and seen the pressures that were under. I often became good friends with ministers because I so admired what they did in trying to lead church. So I was in no rush to go into the ministry, and I put it off for many years, probably, close to 15 years or something like that. And then when I moved to the Isle of Man, it happened again. And at this point I was married to Fen and thought, maybe there's something in this and we should investigate it. I ended up in the ministry. I applied for Bible college, didn't think I'd get accepted. That's a whole nother story. Did my course with no intention of signing up or applying for ministry. And then the minister left the church and I was asked to take over. And even then, I got before God and says, God, now this person here would be much better at doing it than I am. And what about that person? What about that person? I still didn't want to go in. I still had loads of fears and doubts. But eventually I gave in when God says, if I'd have wanted them, I'd have called them, but I'm calling you. It's got nothing to do with your ability. Just do it. So I understand it, and I want you to get this, because many times over the years, I've seen people step out into a ministry or maybe start their own small church or something because they were convinced that God had told them to do it. And yet I have also seen those same people end up with major problems. And most of the time, if I'm honest, their ministry or their small church has collapsed and ended up hurting a number of people. And I'm not, please don't take this the wrong way, I'm trying to protect you and protect people. What I'm saying is, be certain that God has called you. We can convince ourselves that God has called us. It doesn't mean he has. So we need to be really certain, that God's saying, yep, you're good enough to do that. You go and do it. And a reason for this, I could give you many, but if you read Numbers chapter 12, it's where Aaron, Moses' brother, and Miriam, it says they begin to talk about Moses, as in talk about him behind his back, saying, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not good enough. I could do a better job than that. And they begin to question whether he should be leading and if they should be following him, and if they should be leading by themselves. And that comes to a sticky end, and God deals with them because he says, I haven't called you, I've called him. And so just be aware, because I want to try and protect you. Just because we can believe we can do something, or maybe even do it better than the person we're following, does not mean that God has called us. I could name people now who I believe could do a much better job than me. We have probably a few people in our church, but there's one people, I watch him in ministry and I think, God, he's amazing. He's really good. I'd follow him, and then I have to come back and say, okay, God, but you've called me. Please help me out because I'm not that good. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Just be careful. Well, let me draw this to a close now. We have found ourselves, not that we expected it or planned it, nobody saw this coming, in the midst of our own wilderness, our own desert, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're all at sea. We don't really know what the future looks like. But in the midst of that, what might God be calling you into or you to do? And it could look totally different for everybody, But we need to be attuned, our ears attuned to what God is saying and listening in. And that means sometimes our own dreams and desires have to be put to death, laid down, in order to hear clearly. Because if we don't, we'll hear and listen through the filters that we already have. So we'll only hear what we want to hear rather than what God is actually saying. So just be careful. But I do believe God is calling his people into something new. And he's been preparing many of us. Many of us have really struggled. I have really struggled through this time. I've learned things about myself that have shocked me and scared me a bit, and made me realize how much I need God going forward, even more than I did before. And not just because I thought I knew better. It's not just that, but I believe that God is going to lead us into something so amazing. We need to be close to him and we need to hear what he's saying. And God is wanting you and I, in whatever role, to join with him in his mission to set broken people free. And that may mean changing the way we've been doing things drastically to make this happen, because there's an urgency in this. I don't know when Jesus is coming back. I'm not even going to guess. But I do believe time is shortening and we need to be about what God is doing rather than just playing church. I believe that God is asking you and I to live for something that is bigger than us, bigger than my desires, my comfort zone, or me doing what I want to do. And the same for you. I believe that God is calling us to step out in faith, in spite of any genuine fears, hurt, or doubts that we may have, knowing that it's not about our ability, our skills, or even our good character. Look at the amount of flawed leaders in the Bible, not just Moses, Abraham, David. I could go on and on and on, So it's not even about our character. It's not that character isn't important. It is vitally important. But God uses flawed people. So it's not about any of those things, but it is all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus and what he has done for us and more importantly, what he wants to do in us and through us for his kingdom to grow, for his church to grow. And let's remember, it's his kingdom, it's not ours. It's why you'll never ever see, and if you do see it, come back to me and tell me, you'll never see Des Deer Ministries. I'm not interested. You know, I don't care. I just want to see the church thrive and flourish and God's kingdom grow. So it's about Jesus, it's about his kingdom and his glory, not ours. Dare we begin to even dream that we can live that way? Can we have the courage, in spite of our fears, to say, God, I'm in. I'm in. Whatever it looks like, whatever you're asking me to lay down, whatever you want me to commit to going forward, I'm in, as long as I'm part of your plan and your team in building your kingdom for the glory of your name. I pray that you will be encouraged by this and not discouraged. I pray that it'll hopefully help you think, and that you'll have seen that through the life of Moses, it's okay to have fears and doubts and struggles, as long as we still step forward into God's calling or into whatever position he wants us to be. You know, for many, many years I was a follower, and I still am a follower, and I'm happy to be a follower. If I came out of leading a church now, I'd be fine with that, and I'd be in a church where I would follow somebody else. I have no problem with doing that. So just be careful. You know, maybe God's asking you to be a number 2 or just to follow rather than be a number 1, and he's trying to protect you from that. So be careful, listen in, but above all, have the courage to step out into this amazing future of what God is going to do in our communities for his name's sake. Be blessed. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.